So go into Duna, you have to start with your rocket design, and this is what I'm going to build. This is going to be my example. You don't have to copy this exactly, but this is a good starting point if you're new to the game and this is the first time you go into Duna. But first off, let's enable tweakables. Now how do you do that? First off, we have to go to the main menu. Okay, so in the main menu, go to settings. To enable tweakables, you need to be in general. And you see advanced tweakables by here. I already had it set, but by default it is off. So enable that. If you're okay with building the rockets, you can skip this part. Hopefully there'll be a time code in the description to the mission where we go to Duna and you can learn how to get to Duna. Okay, let's start our build now that we've tweakables enabled. I'm going with the command pod Mark III. All the parts I'm going to use are going to be Mark III parts. So let's raise this up to give ourselves room to build the rocket. Okay, let's start off with every rocket you engineer, every mission, do it in reverse. So the last thing you're going to do is return to Kerbin. So we need a heat shield. So let's get the 2.5 meter heat shield and some parachutes. I'm going to assume you know the basics of KSP and where most of the parts are in the menu. If not, then pause the video at the right point and see where I'm getting them from. Right, and also because Duna, we're going to use these parachutes to enter Duna's atmosphere, we need some more parachutes because the atmosphere is so thin. So let's get the Mark II radial mount ones, put symmetry to 3. Now I'm going to put these either side of the hatch. Let's lower them down a bit because we're going to add some more parachutes. And don't put them over the hatch, otherwise your Kerbals won't be able to get out. But also, as I said, Duna's atmosphere is so thin that it's hard to slow down. Let's add some drogue chutes. Let's put symmetry to 4. Let's put 4 of these on there. Put them up there. And yes, they're not in the way of the other parachutes. So let's start off with the staging. Right, we want the drogue chutes to slow us down before we can open the other parachutes. So let's put those drogue chutes. If you're not sure which parachutes or which part you're picking, you can either hover over the staging part or you can hover over the part and see which on the staging are highlighted. So let's go ahead and separate them off. Right, now that's ready to re-enter Kerbin, but it's not ready to go and land on Duna because we need a rocket. So first off, let's go to the decouplers. Get the TD25, let's put them under there. Now, if you don't want that shroud, if you think that looks ugly, which I normally do, you can pick the decoupler up and put it a bit closer to the heat shield so it's touching, and hey presto, and that does work. I've tried that out many times. Right, let's get our tank. Now I've chosen the Rockomax X200, and for our engine we're going to use the Poodle, which is the 2-pronged engine, redesigned by Squad, and that should give us a lot of Delta V. If you haven't got that right reading but there, go to the Delta V. This is new to the game on version 1.6 and up, and make sure that it is set to vacuum. Because most of this time we're going to use this engine in the vacuum. We're going to use it to launch from Duna, but it's going to be enough for us to return from Duna and get back to Kerbin, as well as make sure we land safely on Duna. Right, to make sure that we land safely on Duna, we do need landing legs. So symmetry 4 again. Make sure you don't obstruct the front where the hatch is going to be, where we're going to put the ladder. Now, with the landing legs, put them as low as possible. And that is to protect the engine bells. Because if we are going to land in Duna, we don't want to hit the ground too hard, which bends these landing legs and then hit the rocket, damaging it. That means you'll have to phone the Blunderbirds, but they're out of action until Matt Lone has his internet up and running. Right, let's add some more of the knickknacks that we need for this mission, like power. So let's go to electrical. I'm going to add 2 of these batteries. We don't need large batteries, but let's make sure symmetry 2, put them on the side by here, out the way. In fact, let's put them by here for the time being. We may have to move them. Now let's add add some solar panels. Let's symmetry to 4. I'm using the large solar panel. You probably could get away with the small ones, but hey, let's make sure you have enough charge. Also, we need some RCS control. Okay, so get the RCS thruster block, add a load on the top there. I'm going to add a load down the bottom here because you want the center of mass to be in between the RCS blocks. And for using RCS, we do need some fuel tanks. Let's use the Saturn Stratus V round molar propellant tank. Let's, I think 2 of them would be fine. No, let's add 4, just in case. Let's put them by here. Okay, I think that's quite good. The only thing we're missing on this lander now is a ladder for our Kerbals. So go to Utility, use the Mobility Enhancers, Symmetry to 1, because you need 1 ladder for the front. Now, these are nice, easy and cheap. Let's add it there to make sure it gets to a command pod. Which, let's get the Bay Mobility Enhancer. Extend ladder after fitting it. See if it reaches the ground. If it doesn't, you'll have to lower it down a bit, which let's do that. Doesn't matter if it clips the ground, because it doesn't affect the rocket, or it won't flip it over. Okay, let's add some more of these. If you're wondering how I'm copying a part and placing it, I'm hovering over the part, don't select it, hold down Alt and click the part. I'm not sure what it is on consoles, but that's where it is on PC and Mac and Linux. Let's add another 1 rung by there. And hey presto, I think the lander is ready for landing on Duna and returning to Kerbin. So let's get back to place tools, retract the ladder, and let's retract the landing gear at the same time. Oh yes, and staging. We want this to decouple when we return to Kerbin. Otherwise, we won't be able to land with this rocket. So let's put the decoupler above the parachutes, which we'll also need for landing on Duna. Right, we're going to build this in a couple of stages. At the moment, we've got the land stage and return back to Kerbin stage, but we need the transfer stage to get us to Duna. So let's go ahead, get a decoupler at TD25, place that there. And for the fuel tanks, I'm using the Rockermax X200. And for the rocket engine, let's use another Poodle engine, because once you're in space, you don't need so much thrust, and the smaller the engine, normally the smaller the engine, the more delta V you have. Like we have 1461. If we try something like Skipper with a bit more thrust, you have a lot less delta V. So let's go ahead, use the Poodle. And that's our transfer stage. Now we need a launch stage. So let's go ahead, another decoupler. And this time let's use some larger tanks, because it's going to take a hell of a lot of fuel to get us into orbit. Let's use the Rockermax Jumbo 64. Okay, again, Alt, copy part, and place underneath there. I think 2 of them should be enough. Now let's go to the engines, and for the main engine, let's use a mainsail, because this is going to give us a lot of thrust to get us into orbit. Right, now that we've added a launch stage, we realize that we don't have enough delta V to return from Duna. We may have enough delta V to get to Duna and land safely, but not to return back to Kerbin. And if you want all that extra science that you may have added to your spacecraft, then you're going to have to do that. Okay, so let's get the hydraulic manifold. Now, before we do that, let's go and copy this rocket assembly. So hold down Alt, click that part. And now let's get the hydraulic manifold. Make sure that symmetry is at 2. Place them on the side of the rocket up, on the upper tank by here. Get the booster, and then we'll put them on the side of the hydraulic manifold. Now double check, because sometimes these attach themselves to your rocket and not to the detachment point of the decoupler. And excuse me while I move the camera around. Okay, these might wobble a bit, so let's add some structural support for it. Let's go to strut connector. I like to add about, well, 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom. Just like so. Let's go down to the bottom and make sure that is secure. Now what you can do with advanced tweakables enabled is you could right click on the rocket part and click auto strut. If you do that, make sure that you do it to root part or grandparent part. But I tend not to like to do that because sometimes that can summon the Kraken. I haven't tried it out on later versions of this version of KSP, but it's still a bit hesitant. If you can add these struts, do so. If you can't add them struts, then go to the auto strut. Right, lastly, for the boosters, we need some aerodynamics support or nose cones to make sure that you can slickly go through the air or the atmosphere. And hey presto, this is our Duna rocket. Just one last little detail. Let's get the launch stability enhancers, make sure symmetry is 2. Add them to the sidebar here like that. I think what we'll do as well, we could add a few down here just to make sure it doesn't wobble on the launch pad. And hey presto, that's done. This is ready for our mission. So go ahead, name your craft. I'm going to call it the Duna Explorer Tutorial. Okay, so you could name it anything you want, just make sure you're safe. And I suggest if you're building it, just in case your PC or console crashes, save as you're going along. Before we go and launch though, we notice that staging isn't correct. Now we have these decouplers decoupling before we fire the engines off. So let's go ahead, make a stage up here, stage 7, drag the decouplers up there. And now let's get the launch stability enhancers to decouple when we fire our engines so we don't fall back to the ground. Save that again. Oh, and one last little detail which I almost forgot. Fuel lines. So go to the fuel tanks, get the external fuel duct, symmetry 2 again, attach it to the outer tanks first, then to the inner tank. And what this will do, for those who don't know, should have little arrows on it pointing which way the fuel will go. This will drain the fuel from the outer tanks to the inner tanks, so when we separate the outer tanks, the inner tanks will still be full. That added a few more delta V points or meters per second, so if we take that off, 8161, and add it back onto there, 8725. This should have enough delta V to get us to Duna and back. In fact, I know it does because I tested it out. One quick last thing before we go and launch. Go to your command and control, get the Veneer engine, set symmetry to 4, put 4 up the top right here, symmetry to 4 please, and then do the same again for the rocket engine down the bottom. Now sometimes you may notice that symmetry is at 4, you hover over 2 symmetry part and it goes back to 2. So yeah, you can either go symmetry to 4 and avoid the parts, but it looks like we can't, or you can press X or whatever you do on the console. Just attach the Veneer engines down the bottom there, and basically these are going to act like RCS to be able to control our rocket after we get into orbit, because this is going to be a heavy thing to maneuver around, so we need the extra oomph to maneuver. So let's go to the launch pad. Right, so your spacecraft is built, you're ready to go to Duna. How do you do that? Well, first off, go to the map view, zoom out, and as you can see, I've probably already done it, set Duna as your target. And what we want to do is launch from Kerbin and zoom out, use the gravity of Kerbin to pull us along to get us into a higher orbit to intercept Duna at some point like there. Right. So this is where you need to know angles, and it's best to have a look online sometimes and find out what angle you need. What I found out is that Duna needs to be about 45 degrees, so between you and Duna. Use the sun as the reference at the center point. draw a line from Kerbin to the sun, and then up to Duna. You can see we're about 90 degrees. So let's go ahead, fast forward time quickly to get us about 45 degrees. This may take a bit of time, but it's worth the wait. Otherwise, you'll have to use a ton of fuel just to launch the Duna. Right, so we're almost at 45 degrees. We're close enough, I think. Let's turn those asteroids off so we can see Kerbin there. Yeah, I think that'll do. And what we need to do now is launch up into orbit. And then we can set a maneuver node and see if we're correct in our intercept of Duna. Right, now for the fun part. Let's get up there into orbit. So first off, let's engage the SAS. Press U or whatever you use to engage the lights on your command pod. And then let's count down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. We forgot to throttle up. Let's try that again. Right, let's try that again. And this time, let's go up. So engage the SAS, full thrust, switch your cockpit lights on. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. Now, when you launch first off, your thrust to weight ratio, if you've got this design, will be about 1.5. But in any case, whatever type of rocket you use, just go vertically until you're about 100 meters per second and start tilting over, like we are now. And what we want to do is slowly turn to your right. We roughly want to get up to about 90 degrees on that mark by here on the nav ball when we get about 10 kilometers. So doing a bit of aggressive turn by here while you keep an eye on these outer rockets. The fuel, as soon as they run out, you want to stage so you dump the weight and the weight doesn't reduce. If you leave a lot of weight on your rocket while you're launching, then it's going to reduce the amount of delta V you have. Try not to flip out and try and stay close to that prograde marker. We're about 10 kilometers. We're almost at 90 degrees. We're a bit off. That's not too bad though. Every launch isn't perfect. In fact, every launch vehicle, depending on how it's built, should be launched slightly different depending on how efficient your launching is. So do not worry about it. I'm not a brilliant one at launching rockets. Okay, the outer stages are about to run out. Let's stage them. It didn't hit the center rocket. That's good. Let's continue our gravity turn. Oh, and by the way, when you get thermal heating on your launch, don't worry about it unless you're going about 1.5 thousand meters per second in the atmosphere and you start seeing those heat lines appear. And then you only have to worry if they go all the way red. Right, we want to keep on launching up into orbit until we get about 10 kilometers. In fact, if you haven't got that display up here, go to map view, click on the apoapsis, right click on it to keep it up, and make sure that you fly with the nav ball. That I should have mentioned on the start of the launch. Right, wait till this gets about 100 kilometers. Click X to kill velocity. Now let's create a maneuver node to get ourselves into orbit. I'm assuming you know most of these standard techniques, but I'm going to go through them quickly. So create maneuver node, raise your orbit to about 100 kilometers roughly. Click on maneuver node, and now press R to engage your RCS. Oh yes. And if you're worried about these running out before you get into Duna, you can cut them off by right clicking on them and cutting off the supply, so then you have these RCS left for when you get to Duna or back. Right, this burn is about 47 seconds, half of 40 or 50 is about 25 seconds, so let's time warp to 25 seconds on maneuver node. And hey presto, go full thrust. And this should definitely get us into orbit. Right, we've almost completed our burn, so let's throttle down slowly just to finish that the little amount of delta V's we need to burn until we get close to 0, and I think that's good enough. Let's check our orbit. 101 kilometers by 100. Oh, that's better than I thought it would be. Okay, so how do we get to Mars? Right, so, or Duna, sorry. Let's zoom out on the map. Make sure that we still have Duna selected. It's about 45 degrees away from us. So what we want to do is line the orbit of Kerbin up first. So in the direction that Kerbin's orbiting, in that direction. And what we want is a gravity boost from Kerbin. So in the orbit about roughly 45 degrees, let's select by here, add a maneuver. Create a maneuver node on the prograde until you leave Kerbin's sphere of influence, and you can see, whoa, we've got an intercept already. We're raising our orbit to get an intercept for Duna. Let's be a bit more fuel efficient and get the first encounter. Alright, we're not going to play with this maneuver node right away to get an exact intercept. What we'll do, we'll create a maneuver node on the way to do a correction burn, and NASA does this hundreds of times because, you know, little things affect your orbit and you're never going to be 100% perfect on each burn. So let's go ahead and engage a maneuver. Now if you're on the PC, I suggest you get the Scribble alarm clock. This is handy. This has helped me a lot of times because you can add an alarm for your maneuver. So kill warp, 1 minute. This burn is going to take us 2 minutes. So let's add 2 minutes onto that. So add alarm, and in 8 minutes this will give us an alarm and tell us to start or get ready to burn. So let's accelerate time. As you can see, it's slowing down time just before we come to our maneuver. It'll give us an alarm, and hey presto, we're almost here. Let's engage our RCS by here. And we need to burn 1 minute before and 1 minute after the node. It looks like we're going to have a stage by here as well because we don't have enough delta V in the current stage. So, about a minute. Let's go full thrust and disengage the RCS to save RCS fuel. And all we have to do is keep an eye on this. As soon as this stage 7 runs out, we're going to have to stage for stage 5 to fire to get us the rest of the way there. Let's come out, map view, stage again. Now we've got Poodle engine. This burns a lot slower. That's why the first part of the maneuver was very quick and this one's going to be a bit slow. And that's why it's taking about 2 minutes to burn. Reduce thrust. And tiny bit of thrust to finish that maneuver off. Let's click the tick. Okay, we're not intercepting, so let's give ourselves a little bit more burn. And that's taking us away. We're heading mostly prograde, so let's turn the rocket round retrograde. Burn a bit slowly, carefully, and we've got our intercept. So before we create a maneuver node, let's leave Kerbin. And in fact, this is a good point to hit your F5 or your quick save key. On the PC, you can hit Alt F5 to create a custom save, so you can name it. So you can create one for your launch, your travel across, get into orbit, or go into Duna. Right, now that we're on our way to Duna, let's switch off the user interface and accelerate time and watch Kerbin fall below us. I always love watching this view, and why not? So let's pick up the time accelerate, go to map view, and what we want is look for the sphere of influence change, which should be coming up. It'll change our time warp to 50 times to stop us from the miscalculations that normally happen in the game, because these numbers are huge. Okay, so there's our intercept. We're going to be going this path, but if you have a close look at this path, you can see that we've got two lines, a purple one and a blue one. We want the maneuver node on the blue one, so you might as well zoom in, add a maneuver node, zoom out, and then you can maneuver the maneuver node where you want it to. So let's put it about here. I think that's good enough. Now what we want to do is focus on Duna, zoom in, and find out where we're going to be passing. We're passing quite a distance away. So where's that maneuver node? Let's go ahead and adjust it. Now use the purple marker to pull yourself down, get yourself into the correct plane of Duna. Where are we? Ooh, we're all the way over there. Let's try that again. Ooh. Could be a bit sensitive. If you've got a mouse wheel, then you can use the mouse wheel to adjust it. It might give you a bit more precision. Now let's adjust. I think that's the retrograde. In fact, let's right click on that to maneuver on the periapsis to keep it up, and use the mouse to adjust this one. We want it to get as close as possible. Ooh, we're getting closer. 400 kilometers away. Let's go up a bit. Ooh, too far. You do have to fiddle with the maneuver node, so yeah, don't worry about that. You can also do a quick save, a quick load if you want to fiddle around a bit more with it. Let's get to about 90. Yeah, let's do the 100 kilometer thing again, and then we'll create a maneuver node when we approach to get into an orbit. Okay, so that maneuver node is going to take 7.1 meters per second. It's in 96 days, and the burn time is 1 second. Now that's a problem, a 1 second burn time, because it's going to be hard for you to make sure that you burn that. So what you can do is right click on the engine, reduce your thrust. Well, let's get a time warp. You can't do that in time warp. And adjust it down until it's, I think, a bit more manageable. Let's say about 20 seconds. That'll do. That'll make it easier. We can burn 10 seconds before and 10 seconds after. And also it gives us a time to adjust our thrust to get as close as possible to this maneuver node. Right, we're coming up on the maneuver node. When you're going to burn this maneuver node, I suggest that you go and focus on Duna so that you can watch the final result of the burn happen before you. That way, if you do something wrong, you can try perhaps quickly correct it. So let's go ahead. We need to burn about 10 seconds before and 10 seconds after. You can watch the flight path get closer as you're burning this. So yeah, map view helps quite a lot, as well as using the nav ball to fly these craft. Just reduce thrust. Burn this slowly. I think that is close enough. Right, now that we're on our approach and we're getting to the height, or getting close to the planet that we want, we can create a maneuver node here. And let's get it to about 100 kilometers. I think that's good enough. That's going to take 609 meters per second. We've got plenty of delta V for this mission. And you can use the Kerbin alarm clock like I was going to, or what you can do is you can see you can create another maneuver node, or you can click warp here. So let's go ahead, add a warp here, but there, come from map view and wait quite a while to get there. Right, now we're in the sphere of influence of Duna, so let's go ahead and warp a bit closer. The maneuver node is set, or you can go and create one as you enter the sphere of influence. Let's get on our maneuver node. And this burn is going to take us 26 minutes. Oh yes, I almost forgot. Don't forget to put your thrust back up on your rocket, otherwise it will take a long burn. This is going to be 1 minute and a half burn, so what's half for 1 minute and a half? That is 45 minutes, or 45 seconds, before and after the burn. Yes, math in my head. Time is funny. I'm more of a metric man. Okay, let's burn. In fact, let's go to map view so you can see what we're doing. You can use this visually rather than just using this as well. As long as we don't enter the atmosphere, we'll be fine. So let's reduce the thrust. And the atmosphere height on this planet, if you want to know, is about 50 kilometers. In fact, if I double click on Duna, on here you should have this Duna parameters. Tells you the mass, the gravity, sphere of influence, escape velocity if you scroll down, atmosphere height 50 kilometers. So that's a nice handy tool for you to use. Okay, we're in orbit. In fact, we're in orbit and deorbiting still. We're in orbit. Right, we are here in orbit around Duna. Now note that the atmosphere of Duna is so thin, and some of the highest points on the planet are sort of more like mountains, I suppose, but they are very thin atmosphere, so there's not enough atmosphere there to slow you down. Like over here, it's a bit too high for us to land safely using the atmosphere, but we do have low points like this trench here, canyon of some kind, and we have low points, but you want to avoid these higher areas unless you have enough parachutes or enough fuel for landing. We're going to have to use our rocket engine to land in any case, so let's search for a place that we can land like this trench, but somewhere a bit bigger. There are large areas where there are places that we can land, like here. In fact, we're coming upon it, so let's create a maneuver node, prepare it and land from this area. So let's adjust our angle so we come more in the center of it. Now I'm overshooting the grey part, which is where I'm planning on landing, and hopefully when we come to the atmosphere will slow us down, we'll use the engines and we'll eventually land in this grey area. So yeah, let's see how this works. Let's stage the rocket. Finish our burn off. I think that's a bit over, but that's okay. Now that we're descending, point retrograde when you're coming into Duna, when you're going to enter the atmosphere. And if you see this box here, if you click on it, you can change the mode between surface, orbit, and if you're targeting something, target. Click on surface because we want the retrograde to show the difference in speed between you and the surface, not the orbit of the planet, which is slightly different if you look at the speeds. And it also points you in the right direction for the rotation of Duna. So let's go ahead, accelerate time. We want to start entering the atmosphere, which is about 50 kilometers. Then we'll come out a time warp into real time. Then when you time accelerate in the atmosphere, you'll be in physics time acceleration. Now, the parachutes are showing as green. We're going to open the drogue chutes first, which they're not showing yellow yet. They're starting to show yellow now. We accelerate time until we come about, let's say, 25 kilometers. We'll use our rocket engines to slow down enough that we can open our drogue chutes. Okay, let's get that down to about 600 meters per second. And then we'll see if we can pop the drogue chutes. Okay, we're still in a very thin atmosphere, so they won't open fully until we're deeper in the atmosphere. Let's reduce our thrust a bit, reduce our speed a bit more to say 500 meters per second. Okay, they're open. I'm not sure when they fully open, which is 25,000 kilometers up. Let's pop the other parachutes to slow ourselves down. Engage the gear. Start thrusting. Right, the parachutes are fully open. Now we want to come down now. The height of the altitude is at 400 meters, although this says 800. So you have to really watch the ground when you come in close. If you can, look for your shadow at your spacecraft. There it is. This will give you a good indicator of where you're going to impact and how close you are. Now you want to land about 5 meters per second or less. I suggest less, because otherwise with this craft this will bounce a bit. So just gently control the thrust until you hit the ground. Hit X when you land, and hey presto, you've landed. If we landed a bit harder, we may have destroyed the engine or the landing legs, and we would have been stranded, and we would have to have called the Blunderbirds. And at the moment, Blunderbirds are out of action because Matlone doesn't have internet. So anyway, we have landed. We have a few things to do first, and I suggest you do them before you do anything else. Who's our engineer? Bill. So get Bill out on EVA. And let's repack all these chutes. And why we're repacking these? That is because we're going to need these to land on Kerbin. Can we reach that one over there? Yes, we can, because he has long arms. Don't question it. Okay, now we can descend our Kerbal on the ladder. In fact, let's extend that one. You have to wait for it to extend before you can walk on the ladder. Otherwise your Kerbal will just fall off. And one first Kerbal for all Kerbal kind has set foot on this moon, or this rock, this planet, this planetoid. Okay, so you've landed on Duna, you've done your science, you're ready to go back. How do you get back to Kerbin? That's what Bob is wondering by there with his worried look. So in map view, target Kerbin. And we want this to be minus 75 degrees. So if we use Duna as our straight line, that's 90 degrees there, minus 90 degrees. So 90, 70, 80, 75, I think it would be around by here somewhere. Just a quick guess. So let's quickly accelerate time. So that is about 75 degrees. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't put a protractor. In fact, you can use a protractor against the screen if you want, or you can use mods. So if I go to Kerbal Engineer, let's have a quick look. 77. Close enough. Well, close-ish. In fact, let's fast forward time a bit more. Whoa, I threw a bit over. Never mind. Let's quickly save that. F5. Get our Kerbals back in the rocket. And then we can launch up and make our way back to Kerbin. With the Kerbals aboard, we're ready to launch. Now, same thing like with Kerbin. When you're launching, you want to launch straight up and then slowly do a gravity turn. But because the atmosphere is so thin on Duna, you can do the gravity turn a lot quicker, and there's less chance of you flipping out, especially with a small rocket like this. So let's go ahead, launch, and again you want to launch to 90 degrees. Make sure the north marker is on, well, it's normally on the bottom of the nav ball when you're launching from the Kerbal Space Center, but you want to go at 90 degrees to that north mark. So let's go ahead, engage the SAS, full thrust, gear in, just get ourselves a little bit of speed, and then start turning at 90 degrees on the 90 degree mark. I'll tell you the heading down by here. As I said, we want to do a quick gravity turn with this because we're going through the atmosphere very quickly, as you can see. In fact, we're launching into the daytime on this launch. With the launch up into orbit, you want to make sure that you get to about 60 kilometers or perhaps over. Let's do it about 70, I think. So they hit that. It's quick getting into orbit, see, with this Duna, because the atmosphere is so thin, the planet is so small that the gravity is low. This is a quick 30-second burn, so let's go ahead and do that. And once we're not in orbit, we can plan our maneuver back to Kerbin. Right, now that we're in orbit, let's go ahead, look for Kerbin. It looks like we have to target it again. And let's go ahead and make a maneuver note. Now, when we went to Duna, we went and burnt on the opposite direction that the planet is traveling, that Kerbin is traveling. Now, to lower your orbit around the sun, you want to do the opposite. You want to go and thrust on the side, the heading away, or on this side. So let's go ahead, create a maneuver note here at about 45 degrees until we leave Duna. And as you can see, because we're boosted on that side, it's lowering our orbit. So let's go ahead, start maneuver note, and hey presto, because we're close on our angle, and because I've got Kerbal Engineer to make sure we can get closer, we're able to get our encounter. Now, sometimes you'll get, say, like your close approach. What you can do is fiddle with the maneuver node, fiddle with these, the normal and anti-normal, and what they're called the radial in and radial out. These are the normals and anti-normals. If you're unsure of terms, just hover over them and they'll tell you what they are. Don't be too precise with that. No, we're going to do a course correction on the way back. This is a 36-second burn. And as you notice, we have more than enough Delta V to take this burn, return to Kerbin, and even use a bit more fuel, perhaps, to reduce our impact on the atmosphere where we re-enter. Right, we're on our way. let's go ahead, leave Duna behind. So now we're on our way to Kerbin. Again, let's create a maneuver node halfway, or about perhaps 1/3 of the way towards Kerbin. Add a maneuver node. Focus in on Kerbin again. And then we can see where we're going to approach Kerbin. So let's adjust our maneuver. First off, let's get into the plane of the planet. There, it's a bit hard because we're at an angle. And adjust the prograde or retrograde. Get a man encounter there. We don't want that. Let's look at the height. Now, if you want to do a direct re-entry, which you should be able to do with the craft that we built, I recommend that you go to about 40 kilometers into the atmosphere. It might be a bit hard with this unless you've got a mouse to adjust it finally. So yeah, but there. The worst case scenario is that this will slow us down and reduce us to a high orbit where we come back and use the atmosphere as a break-in again until we re-enter properly. Now the heat shield that we have on the craft should be good enough to do that, but also we need the parachutes which we repacked on the planet, and they're not in the right stage. So let's go ahead, create another stage, put the parachutes in that stage. Let's move it up there. Got the drogue chutes. You don't need to have the drogue chutes to open first. It doesn't matter when you re-enter in Kerbin because all those parachutes should work in tandem. So again, this maneuver is going to take 0.5 a second. I think that's going to be a bit hard to do. So again, reduce the thrust of your rocket till it's something a bit manageable. Let's say about 20 seconds. So you can burn 10 seconds before and 10 seconds after. At this point, you can kill the maneuver node if you're sure about the direction you're pointing and slowly burn. We're a bit over. I think that's okay. I think we'll survive that. Let's do a quick F5 save just in case we don't. And let's warp to the end of the sphere of influence of Kerbin. Now, this is going to take us over 100 days to get there. That's the only problem with KSP. Sometimes the time warp takes quite a while for us to get there into certain places, especially when they're further out in the solar system. Okay, I'm going to do a quick save by here. Where's Kerbin to? There it is. Let's do a quick time warp to get closer. Our periapsis is about 36 kilometers. That's fine. Okay, we're approaching the atmosphere. Now, what you should do is come out of time warp. Now, don't point prograde or retrograde and decouple, because sometimes the rocket engine and the fuel tank will collide with you. So what I suggest you do is go to normal or a radial and then stage. Then you can point to retrograde to make sure the heat shield is pointing at the atmosphere, and also change the speed indicator to surface and then accelerate time until you enter the atmosphere. You can do a bit of time accelerations in the atmosphere. Should be fine. Now let's pin that up so we can see the ablator burning off. Right, you can see that we've had enough ablator on that heat shield, and it looks quite black now that it's been burnt off a bit. So now all we have to do is wait for the parachutes to become all well, safe, so they're not red or yellow. We can deploy them now. Accelerate time, because this part takes quite a bit of time. And it looks like we're going to go for a splashdown. When I did the test, I landed on some land somewhere. Oh, we're not too far off the land there. In fact, are we near the Kerbal Space Center? No, we're far away. Because most professionals in KSP would adjust their orbits or re-entries so that they would actually land near the KSC. But hey, this is just a quick tutorial for those who want an easy fix on how to land or get to Duna and back safely. Coming in for the splashdown. These Kerbals have been to another world and back, and they have returned safely. If I can do it, so can you. Okay, this is Jebediah saying that going to Duna and back is easy. There's no reason why you can't do it, just give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? Kerbals die, and you can try again. Anyway, I'm Morbata. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you liked, click the like button. If you didn't, click the dislike button and let me know what you want me to improve upon. Trust me, I'm an engineer.